Next, it's an honor and privilege, especially as a Japanese American, to introduce the U.S. Trade Representative, as an Asian American, to introduce the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Katherine Tai. She'll join a fireside chat moderated by the Honorable Erika Moritsugu. She's Deputy Assistant to the President and Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders Senior Liaison. Now, I've been asked to introduce Erika, as she in turn will introduce Ambassador Tai and moderate their fireside chat. So let me tell you a little about Erika. She is Deputy Assistant to President Biden and the first ever Asian American and NHPI Senior Liaison. She's a fourth generation Japanese American, a Yonsei, and a fifth generation Chinese American, a Gosei. And she is the highest ranking Japanese American in the Biden-Harris administration. Drawing on her successful career in the private sector, Capitol Hill, federal government, and the civil sector, Erika covers international and domestic policy and public engagement. She's the President's representative to the Asian American and NHPI community, and the AA and NHPI community's representative to the President. So, in short, she makes sure that the Asian American and NHPI community is seen, heard, and valued. So, we're incredibly lucky to have a cabinet member and deputy assistant to the President take the time to join us today. So please give a warm welcome to these two dedicated and accomplished public servants, Ambassador Tai and Erika Moritsugu.
Good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu. Aloha, y'all. And thank you to the U.S.-Japan Council for the generous invitation to share this space with you this morning. I have the distinct honor of being here today to introduce my dear friend and a national treasure, Ambassador Katherine Tai. Then we'll go into a discussion about how the work of the U.S. Trade Representative and the Biden-Harris administration and all of government effort is advancing and deepening the U.S.-Japan alliance. Ambassador Katherine Tai was sworn in as the 19th U.S. Trade Representative on March 18th, 2021, after a unanimous Senate confirmation vote. As a member of the President's Cabinet, Ambassador Tai is the principal trade advisor, negotiator, and spokesperson on United States trade policy. Separately, the President also appointed her to be the co-chair of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, and the co-chair of the President's Advisory Commission on Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. Now, prior to her unanimous Senate confirmation vote, did I mention that before? Ambassador Tai spent most of her career in public service, focusing on international economic diplomacy, monitoring, and enforcement. She previously served as the Trade Council and Trade Subcommittee staff director for the Committee on House Ways and Means in the U.S. Congress. In this capacity, Ambassador Tai played a pivotal role in shaping U.S. trade law negotiations, strategies, bilateral and multilateral agreements, including the recently renegotiated U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Ambassador Tai is also an experienced World Trade Organization litigator. She previously developed and tried cases for the Office of the United States Trade Representative and eventually becoming the chief counsel for China trade enforcement. Before transitioning to federal service, she practiced law in the private sector, clerked for district court judges, and taught English in China. Ambassador Tai has traveled extensively representing the United States and is just returning from a recent international travel to South Africa for an important trade forum and to Osaka for the G7 trade ministers meeting. She's visited Japan a number of times in this current role while serving as U.S. Trade Representative, and has welcomed Japanese officials here, stateside, from both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry to engage on key issues and opportunities facing the U.S.-Japan relationship. So I don't know if anybody in the audience can see it, but the folks who are zooming in or watching the webcast will see the star and heart emojis while I talk about Ambassador's leadership and what a personal and professional inspiration she's been to me. So enough about me talking about her. Let's talk with her a little bit.
Lovely. Erika, thank you so much. And I hope that everybody on screen sees the heart and star emojis going back towards you from me too. Just imagine them.
But like an anime set, stage set. Ambassador Tai, thank you so much for being here. It is the honor of a lifetime to work under your leadership in policy and engagement in the Biden-Harris administration. And I wanted to start with this question, mostly because it's top of mind for me, and I'm actually a little curious about it. As an Asian American serving in the president's cabinet and the first woman of color to serve as U.S. Trade Representative, what does it mean to you to represent your community at the highest levels of government?
So it's wonderful to be here with all of you during a very busy fall where the U.S.-Japan relationship features very bright and very heavily. Erika, to your question about what it means to me to serve at the highest levels of our government as an Asian American and as an Asian American woman, I think it's just very simple. This is the biggest privilege and honor that I have ever experienced in my lifetime. And I think I say that also, and I hope that for our community, that they appreciate the privilege and the honor that it is to be here, not just to serve in this government, but to serve our communities in this government. It's a really interesting position to be in. You are both an ambassador by title, an ambassador with respect to trade, but also an ambassador of the administration to our communities, and an ambassador for our communities back to the administration. So I feel the enormous responsibility being in the cabinet, just as I know you must feel the enormous responsibility being special assistant to the president in terms of creating the connectivity between government and our people. And I think one of the things that I find most inspiring about working for this president is when you hear him talking about America, the America that he grew up in, the America that he is president to, and the America that he is pushing us towards in the future. His vision is of an inclusive America, an America that grows, an America that welcomed his family. And I heard him talk about this very, very movingly in May during Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, where he talked about his family coming to the United States being persecuted for being Catholic in Ireland. And then in the same conversation saying to all the little kids who had been invited to the East Room in the White House, saying, will you promise me that one day when you are president, when someone, your assistant comes in and tells you that Joe Biden is here to visit you, that you promise not to say Joe who, but that you'll let me come visit you. And you just looked at the little faces in the front row at that event and just the sincere nods. You're like, yes, Mr. President, we promise you that when we become president. And it just, I think that it is one of the most important aspects of President Biden's leadership is that inclusivity, his understanding of the inclusivity of American society, the American polity in the past, but also his projecting it into the future.
Amazing, thank you. A large part of your work as our country's leading voice on trade is traveling around the world extensively. You just arrived back from a trip, was it last week? It was last week from Osaka.
A week and a half ago, yes.
Yeah, whatever. For the G7 trade ministers meeting, and that included a focus on economic resilience and leveling the playing fields across our G7 partners. I'm wondering whether you could discuss how that work is significant more broadly in the U.S.-Japan relationship.
Certainly. I have to commend the Japanese government for their G7 presidency. And of course, I participate in the trade lane for the trade ministers' conversation. But it's been very, very clear that one of the main themes of Japan's host year for G7 was this concept of economic security. And that's really very much in the wheelhouse of what USTR does. We are both a member of the foreign policy team because we are outward facing in terms of international economic relations, but we are equally a part of the overall economic policy team. What we do impacts our domestic economy and is a part of our domestic economic policy. So when Japan was highlighting even last year during the end of the German G7 year that the focus for 2023 would be on economic security, I understood this on at least two levels. So one level is with respect to your country's economic security. To think about national security, we tend to think about, military defense. There's an economic side of that. The country's economic security, the ability of the country to withstand shocks, withstand outside pressures, to be able to stand against pressures, coercive pressures, economic coercion type actions are all critical and something that certainly the G7 is very united in knowing we need to confront. But from my perspective as a US trade representative, the other dimension of economic security is economic security when you bring it down to an individual and a community level. And it's part of the same coin. It's the security that the people in your economy and your country, your workers, your family members, your communities, your young people feel about their access to economic opportunity. And I think on this one, it's very connected to the fact that for many of you who are in the business world, you are economic participants, you are leaders in terms of your national economic activity. The global economy right now is going through some stuff. For lack of a more sophisticated term, I think I just say, you look around, no matter where you sit in the economy, but certainly when you are leading enterprises and organizations in the economy, this is a very discombobulated global economy. We're feeling it domestically, we see it around the world, and even the smartest economists, I think, are struggling to explain exactly what's going on or predict how things are going to go. And in this context, I think that the focus on economic security, both big and individual, on level playing field, on how we're going to ensure that our economies can continue to grow in the face of the various pressures, whether it's supply chain fragility and disruption, the need for more resilient supply chains, whether it's climate and the increasing incident of climate events that are deeply disruptive to human lives, but also our economic activity, to the rapid and continuing technological transformation going on all around us with economic implications for our livelihoods, for our work and our workforce. Rising geopolitical complexity in this world. Our ability to come together to focus on these issues and to find cooperative methods of navigating these challenges together is tremendously important, and I think that's the biggest takeaway that I have from the recent meeting in Osaka.
Thank you, and thank you for doing that. That's not an easy trip, you all know that, and your service is in leadership on behalf of the United States, but in the global stage is so important and so impressive. You also travel extensively stateside here. Across the country. You've made engaging the Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities a key part of this travel, I think both as a community member, a community leader, but also as the co-chair of the President's Advisory Commission and the White House Initiative. You've been very intentional about committing to that, which makes, honestly, a long day even longer. So I was hoping that you might be able to discuss some of the most memorable lessons that you've learned while you've been on the road here stateside and how it relates both to your work as USTR, but also as a member of President Biden's cabinet.
Erika, thank you so much for this question, because by asking this question, you affirm that you see and hear what we're trying to do. I think it's quite interesting. USTR is a small agency. We are maximum about 270 people. So we're very small, especially compared to some of our siblings in the interagency who are really massive and have enormously talented workforces. Not a lot of people know what USTR is or who USTR is or what we do. So, and yet, as I've said, we're such an important part of the economic policy team. What we do does impact everyday people's experiences, but they don't necessarily connect the dots. They don't necessarily know who we are. So as US trade representative, a huge part of the approach that I'm bringing to trade now is to challenge myself and my team to get out of Washington, not just to go to places like Tokyo and Geneva and Brasilia. That is really important for us to do, to show up at the G7, the G20, at ASEAN, at the WTO. But equally important, and an area that I think that has been neglected, is we have to push ourselves to get out of Washington to go to St. Louis, Illinois, San Francisco, Santa Fe, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. We just have to go out and connect with the rest of America. And we have to, as I've said to my team, we have to put the US back into USTR. If we're going to properly represent the interests of the United States in trade, we have to inform ourselves of who the United States is. If we don't get out of Washington, the only people who know about us are the most savvy and well-resourced stakeholders in our economy. But we know that one of our challenges, especially as it comes to navigating the complexity in the economy today, is connecting to our people and fine-tuning our policy tools to create economic opportunity here at home and around the world. So as part of our bringing the US back into the USTR, I'm also really privileged to co-chair the White House Initiative and the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in reconnecting with our fellow Americans. A priority of mine is to make sure that I'm going out and touching the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities throughout the United States. And we try to program an engagement on every one of my domestic trips. I think that that is really important because of my position in the government, but also, again, it is part of this connecting what happens in Washington to the experience of real people and the experience of people like us. So I think, you know, what has become very clear to me in all of my outreach with the Asian American community, with the small family farmers, with the manufacturing workers, with the services workers, and all of the small business owners, what is clear to me is that everyone's aspirations are similar. Everyone is looking to build a brighter future for themselves, but especially for their kids. And it's, for us, a part of the American dream. But I think that everybody has a version of the American dream. And in my conversations when I go abroad, I also try to meet with workers. I try to meet with thinkers. I try to meet with the young people. What's clear to me is that we are all, in our own way, trying to build out that middle class, trying to build out that sector of our society where opportunity is accessible. And I think that is the key to our ability to reach that brighter future, not just for ourselves here in the United States, although obviously very important, but for all of us around the world. And I think that Japan is one of our strongest partners in building on this vision.
Exquisite. Extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika.
Madam Ambassador, our leader on behalf of the United States on the global stage, a demonstrated and committed leader to ensure equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Ladies and gentlemen and gentlefolk, let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erika.